The Anthropocene is certainly not my idea. It's an idea that has been formulated by this man. His name is Paul Crutzen. He built bridges in Amsterdam in the 1950s after the war, but he always wanted to become a natural scientist. He then went to Sweden to build houses. And in Sweden, he didn't feel happy with building houses. He kept being curious about the natural sciences. So one day in the local newspaper, he read an ad from the Institute of Meteorology and the Stockholm University asking for a computer expert. Now, he had no idea about meteorology, and he had no idea about computers, but something told him he should apply. And he became one of the leading atmospheric scientists in the world and paved the way to the realization that there are substances that can harm the ozone layer of our planet. And this research contributed to these substances being at least partly banned and to the fact that the ozone layer now is regenerating. And this made Paul Crutzen realize that humankind is not the small force that is just scratching the surface of Earth, but it's something bigger that is happening. So Paul Crutzen started making a list of interventions, of changes that our species has caused on this planet, which is 4.5 billion years old. And we have all the treasures that have been built up over this time with us now, but we are using them in a way that is detrimental to our own species. So Paul, in the year 2000, at a scientific meeting in Mexico, when there was talk about the Holocene again and again, he stood up and said, we are not living in this Holocene, this abstract word, Holocene anymore. We live in the Anthropocene. And this only now 15 years ago was the start of this amazing idea. He wrote, together with Eugene Sturmer, who was a biologist in the United States, wrote a paper formalizing or introducing the idea to the scientific community. Now, what have we now, after 15 years, and this is amazing, today's cover story of Nature magazine is about the Anthropocene. So this idea really is taking off now. It is something science looks into very deeply. And this is a fascinating paper that has just come out today. And last night I had the honor to share the floor with Jan Salasiewicz, who is the head of the Anthropocene Working Group, a formal scientific body looking into the physical evidence of a new geological epoch or era. Now, this group will have the job to find physical markers to show that we are, as a species, influencing, changing the course of Earth's history. And you can see a lot of the physical evidence, things like the 1,000,000 kilometers of tunnels we have been digging in the underground. So you have the mines, the tunnels. You have the rise in the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, in the oceans. You have a global spread of animals and plants. We've been transporting between the continents for centuries now, which are mixing up the global ecosystem. Nitrogen flow greatly changed by the Haber-Bosch process that allows us to isolate nitrogen from the atmosphere and turn it into fertilizer. That has been something that's been making our modern life possible. But now there is more nitrogen brought into the ecosystems by the Haber-Bosch process. And so there's this amazingly long list of indicators that will be used to delineate the Anthropocene from the Holocene. And it looks in geology very orderly. This is the geological timescale. It starts at a period called Hadean, at the very early stage of Earth formation, and at the top left we are now in the Holocene. Now, life, of course, is a bit more complicated than that, as you all know. Anthropocene is something that is a very complex phenomenon. It's something that is influenced by the Earth as it is, by our consciousness that is now getting in the way, if you want, or it's getting into what used to be nature. The number of humans is a factor. The great acceleration of our consumption is a factor. Biosphere reaction to what we do. It's not that humans are the masters of the Anthropocene. We have Earth reacting to us. So the Anthropocene is not something where we just do things and control things. And of course, there are the many future unknowns. And they all play together and make the Anthropocene a very complex thing. but the word is out and it's inspiring people. That's what I find in Germany, for example. This is the House of World Culture, which you see here in the middle. It's right next to Angela Merkel's chancellery, and it's a cultural center funded by the German government. And what was amazing, when we put together what's called the Anthropocene project, we got the funding from the Budget Commission of the German Bundestag. So the parliamentarians, who normally don't like to spend money, as you know, in this time of austerity, they gave us money to explore the Anthropocene in a cultural setting, bringing together geologists, psychologists, sociologists, artists, technology makers. And also at the German Technology Museum in Munich, there's an exhibition on. You see Paul Crutzen has been to the opening, and this is on the right side, it's Achim Steiner, the head of the United Nations Environmental Program, who gave the keynote speech. And in that exhibition, we try to visualize what the Anthropocene is like. You see the evolution of dogs here. You see the evolution of razors, a technological kind of evolution. You see a coral reef that has been put together by people who are concerned about the future, and it's like a knitted coral reef. Part of that exhibition is a artistic interpretation of how the future might play out. This is a hypothetical plastic fossil of the future we have in the exhibition. Now, in the course of my exploration of the Anthropocene, I myself have become critical of the idea. Is it really the right thing we want to do? And I think it's a very good thing if the Anthropocene is declared officially, we will be stuck with it for quite some time. So it might be something we have to live with for another 10,000 years or even more. So some of the criticism or the questions that come up are, is it perhaps anthropocentric? Is it not really reflecting the diversity of life on the planet enough? But is it too much focusing on human agency? Is it perhaps something that is going to be used as a tool of entitlement? So like, we own the Earth is ours, and we can do with it what we want. Or is it a synonym for techno-fixes, like geoengineering, for example? Or does it blur responsibility for climate change? There's a big difference between somebody who lives in India and somebody who lives in the US or the UK or Germany in terms of how much you contribute to climate change. Then there's this interpretation that the Anthropocene is the sum of all environmental problems. If we live with it for a long time, we shouldn't define it as like a nightmare. A sum of all environmental problems would mean that this reflects really just very badly on our species. So the big question for me is there a possibility for a good Anthropocene? We will leave footprints on the surface of planet Earth and the subsurface and the oceans, the atmosphere. We are doing this already. Can we make these footprints more beautiful, more productive, more diverse? Can we move towards a better geological record? What I see as a big service of the Anthropocene idea that it is expanding our sense of time. We are now stuck between nanosecond trading, which is controlling the flow of billions of dollars around the globe, and the doomsdayism of the environmental movement. So these are two time concepts that are really quite contrary, but they're kind of playing together. What we really need is a feeling for the long now, a feeling how, when you get into your car, you interact with the deep past, 300 million years ago when the oil was formed, you're burning, and the deep future, 50,000 years into the future, because the carbon molecules that go through the car will cause climate change still in 10,000 years. Hinduism has been a bit better at long-term thinking. This is the clock of the long now at the Science Museum here. Western culture tries to catch up. And I think the Anthropocene is a very good vector for long-term thinking, conveying a sense of a beginning, not an end. A challenge I see posed by the Anthropocene is that our civilization becomes nature in a sense. And we need cities that think like a planet. We can't rely anymore on this Holocene situation that we just extract resources from this big environment around us and then dump our waste into it. Now, in this Anthropocene period, everything comes back. And if you have a city like here in China, top left, that is 1,000 kilometers long, this is a new nature. It's a geological concoction because of all the materials brought together to build the city. And it's also something that needs to function like an ecosystem. I think what we need is a new bog created in the middle of the city that functions like a liver of the city, or urban gardening that produces the food of the city, renewable energies right in the city, and, for example, cycling highways that make our transport system more sustainable. Anthropocene challenge also is to turn our agriculture into an ecosystem, because we now grow food and raise animals on an area the size of South America and even more than that. And here's a case for recarbonization. We always talk about decarbonization, but what we do is we drag the carbon out of the soil. We cause erosion, creating the Anthropocene markers. And this is something that must stop. Like deforestation is something that connects your plate to the deep rainforest. And Anthropocene agriculture, for me, would be something that acts, again, like an ecosystem. This is the former German border, east-west German border, where the wall ran. It developed a nice green space, and it now forms the longest nature reserve in Europe, which is a nice thing. And I think we should have these genetic highways, in a way, run through our landscape. The same holds true for our technology. We have now 1 billion cars. We have billions of smartphones and everything. And they are a geological phenomenon. So if you hold your iPhone to your ear, you have 40 different mountains connecting with you, because the iPhone is made up of 40 elements from 40 different mines around the world. And it's something we need to make compostable. We need to integrate the technosphere into the biosphere. There's this nice sentence here from James Scott. He says, the larger the pile of rubble you leave behind, the larger your place in the geological record, right? Can it get better? Do we really need to extract resources again and again? Do we really need to fill the oceans with plastic? You see robots developed by DARPA, the US research agency, which are now used by Google. This kind of could be a futuristic vision where animals like that collect environmental data, feed them back into a very intelligent system that is used to run our economy in a more sustainable way. Anthropocene challenge number 5 for me is to build a real sharing economy. And the word has been misused, I think, by companies like Uber, now used as a more form of micro-capitalism. But think about the number of people who now strive to live on a material level like we have enjoyed it in Europe and the US for such a long time. And this is something that is impossible. So we have to get to a situation where we start multiplying our own lifestyles times the number of people, and then see what is still possible, and then not fight for the resources, but share them. And one of the resources we need to share is the atmosphere and its capability to provide us with a climate system that is suitable for human civilization. And this directly leads to another challenge, which is becoming energy smart, because at the moment we are really energy stupid. If you look at when you go to the US, you get into rooms that are cooled down to 15 degrees Celsius and people turn blue. It's something that is just not really smart. And as you can see here, this is a question, how do you get this more out of the same resources? And I think that efficiency is super important, but we need real more innovation, deep innovation. The International Energy Agency has identified a research gap of $100 billion a year. And this is a very conservative organization. It's not a green NGO or something. Here's a guy in Denmark, Henrik Stisdal, who started the Danish wind industry and has become the chief technology officer of Siemens. There's a lot of innovation in a wind farm. Here's a fusion reactor that's currently being built in Germany, and we need to put much more money into energy research. Another facet, of course, of the Anthropocene is the way we create new life forms. And this is something that is almost natural to us, because we've been breeding animals and we've been cultivating plants for 10,000 years now. So we diminish biodiversity by cutting the rainforest, but we also increase biodiversity through means of technology and agriculture. Do these organisms we bring forth, do they reflect an attitude of stewardship, or are they just mere reflections of short-term capitalist interests? Anthropocene has our species in its name, but I think it will be something that makes us more open to all other life forms we share this planet with, and to make us connect, because what it does, it puts human history into natural history. We have now historians looking into human history, and we have biologists looking into Earth history. The Anthropocene brings these two spheres together, and this allows a kind of rooting of human history in Earth history. And I think the sense of connection that will grow from this can be very helpful. And of course, is the question to make the economy a subset of ecology. Because really, when economists say nature is an externality, that's sheer madness. The fact that something we live from, that nourishes us, that makes us safe, like a forest, like the oceans, has no value in economy, no internal value, is just plain wrong. And I think we need to make sure that in an Anthropocene economy, things are put in the right dimension, that not the money that is algorithmically multiplied in computers somewhere in the financial centers is more important to us than what we actually live from. And I would call Kew Gardens the real central bank of this country, for example. I think the Anthropocene offers us a good chance to link our personal lifestyles with these big phenomena you read about in the media. And this is my kitchen table here. We have this little planet in the back here, and it's a talking planet. If you hold a pen to it, it gives you information about planet Earth, languages spoken, heights of the mountains, and so on. So I dream of having a planet there that kind of tells me what the food that I put on the table does to it. That would be a really nice app. Also, I think it's a good time to develop new cultural practices, like the ones I've seen here on the Indonesian island of Bali, where there are daily offerings to make sure that things run smoothly. When I came back there, I looked at my waste bin at home, and I thought, is this my daily offering to planet Earth? So I think we need new kind of rituals. And one idea perhaps would be, you know that there is Earth Day once a year, okay? Where people switch off lights and everything and pretend to be interested in the environment and everything. So perhaps we should do it the other way around. Perhaps we should create something like Earth Destruction Day, where once a year we can do anything we like. We can put toxins in the water, we can go shoot the rarest animals and everything, and just let our aggressions run free. But 364 days a year, we do the new Anthropocene normal. It would be a sign of a better civilization. Also, the Anthropocene, I think, can help to just activate us because it really focuses how big the problems are we face. And the climate march, for example, which you see here in New York, is a good example. Already Ban Ki-moon has used the word to open an environmental summit. He said he opened it last year with the sentence, "Welcome to the Anthropocene." So I have two more challenges. One is that the internet we are building, which becomes the kind of backbone of the way we communicate. I think there's a big challenge there to develop it into an internet of all things. We now talk about the internet of things, which means fridges and cars and commercial products. So how can we create an internet that brings in the interests of the other life forms we share planet Earth with, and perhaps is smart enough to help us compute what future inhabitants of Earth might want us to do or not, because that's a very difficult thing to decide, what is good for future generations. My last Anthropocene challenge I want to put out is revitalizing materialism, because we call ourselves a materialistic culture. Are we really, when we buy the things and then throw them away on the next day, and when things get constructed in a way that they get kaput, to use a German word, within 2 years or 3 years. So we buy new things. So we are more of a turnover society, not a materialistic society. This is a plant I encountered in the deep rainforest of Indonesia. When I was there, I felt like this is untouched nature. And then I realized, no, it's touched nature, because it could be that one of the carbon molecules that went through my life, like when I drove a car, has ended through the atmospheric connections, has ended up in this plant. And this is the future, that all we do permeates all life on Earth, not only with the plastic particles, but much more deep than that. So in a way, nature becomes culture, because what we do is everywhere. And it's the other way around. Culture can become nature, as you see here. This is Glass Beach in California. And for decades, the local community dumped old bottles there. Now, the ocean did a wonderful job at rounding it up and turning it into such a wonderful thing here. So it's now a nature reserve, and they now talk about replenishing it. So it's a nature reserve where we might actually dump waste in order to have this wonderful effect here. The Anthropocene reflects that everything that happens on planet Earth is changing at the moment. Humans have become the dominant force of change, and we need to make sure that we understand this process and perhaps try to get a little bit ahead of it. An overarching concern I have is the question of democracy in the Anthropocene. How do we reflect the interests of future generations? And most importantly, how do we reflect the interests of the weakest? How does that feed into our democratic decision-making? And how do we make sure we are not run by what is now called a plutocracy? How do we make sure that the weakest have a voice in this Anthropocene? But I'm optimistic because we can build machines that simulate the Big Bang. We can create structures looking like flowers on a nanometer scale, and we can afford to send astronauts into space and then getting tweets back from them saying how much they enjoyed a tomato that was sent up to them. A German astronaut came back from the International Space Station. The first thing he said was, "Earth smells beautiful." And I think this is a very precious observation. This is something we should keep in mind when we go into this new geological epoch, which is a process, as Jürgen Renn, the science historian, has said, that reflects about itself. It's an open thing. It's not an ideology. It's something we are in together. It's something that now has many negative connotations, but it's something where we should make sure that the positive connotations become more, that it's an emerging thing that becomes positive day by day, as this wonderful piece of art has formulated here.